Welcome, the anointed ones. Pay close attention, because the moment you think nobody's watching is exactly when the right eyes lock onto you. That's the unsettling truth about being a chosen one. Visibility doesn't start when you're ready. It starts when your life becomes too extraordinary to ignore. And here's the twist. Most people expect the watchers to be obvious, loud, dramatic, or conveniently suspicious. But according to human behavioral studies, the individuals who observe the closest are usually the ones who never announce their presence. They don't blink, they don't brag, they don't broadcast. They just watch. Quietly, consistently, strategically. And that's where your story gets interesting, because the person watching you right now is not who you think it is. Your rise didn't just attract attention, it rearranged attention. People who weren't even checking for you before are suddenly decoding your every move like you're a walking plot twist. Some are curious, some are nervous, some are trying to understand how you're doing what you're doing, and a selective few, they're watching because they know something is shifting in your life, and they want to catch it before anyone else notices. Your glow has become an investigation. Your resilience has become a case study. Your progress has become someone's secret obsession. And while that sounds dramatic, here's where the humor slips in. It's funny how the same people who once acted like you were invisible are now watching you harder than a bored security guard in an empty mall. They've suddenly developed surveillance talents nobody asked for. They could give CCTV cameras a run for their money, but beneath the laughter, there's a deeper layer, because every chosen one reaches a moment where the watchers aren't just spectators, they're indicators. They reveal what's coming, what's shifting, and what's unfolding in your favor. So today, we're not just talking about attention, we're talking about the eyes that found you, the unexpected observer, the silent audience member who sees more than you realize, and the shocking truth behind why you've suddenly become the center of someone's focus. Let's get into it, because the watcher you're thinking of is not the one keeping tabs on you, and the one who is watching will absolutely surprise you. Number 1. The person you least suspected is studying you closely. The person watching you right now is someone you would never place on the list of people who care enough to pay attention. They're not the loud critic, not the jealous one, not the person who threw shade in public. Those people are easy to read. Their intentions are predictable. The real shocker is the one who stayed completely neutral, the one who acted detached, the one who didn't clap, didn't complain, didn't comment. Their silence wasn't disinterest, it was strategy. They were giving themselves the best seat in the room to study you without being seen. This person watched the way you handled setbacks, even when they acted like they didn't notice you were struggling. They paid attention to how you grew, even when they pretended you weren't changing. They saw your confidence rising, your habits shifting, your spirit sharpening. They didn't react because they needed time to understand what they were seeing. You weren't following the pattern they expected. You weren't breaking where they thought you would. You weren't becoming bitter like the average person does after what you went through. That alone made you interesting. Unexpectedly interesting. They never congratulated you because their fascination wasn't supportive. It was investigative. Your life became something they observed like a personal case file. They replayed your choices in their head, trying to figure out how you keep bouncing back when you have every reason to fold. They noticed every detail about your progress, even the ones you thought nobody cared about. They kept their distance because they didn't want you to know your strength was affecting them more than they were comfortable admitting. What makes this person's attention unsettling is the motive behind it. They aren't watching because they want to learn from you. They're watching because your growth is forcing them to confront the fact that they underestimated you. It's making them question their judgment, their assumptions, even their idea of who you were. You changed the storyline without warning, and now they're studying you to understand how they missed it. And the deeper truth? Their shock is only beginning. They're watching because they sense you're not done rising, and they want to know how far you're about to go. Number 2. Your evolution forced people into roles. They never wanted to play. When you started growing, you didn't just change your life, you changed the entire dynamic around you. Your evolution forced people to reveal parts of themselves they never wanted exposed. Some found themselves becoming competitors, even though they never saw you as competition before. Others turned into imitators, trying to copy your moves without admitting they were inspired by you. A few slipped into the role of quiet spectators, watching from a distance because standing close to you made their insecurity louder. And then there are those who became accidental critics, people who didn't dislike you until your growth made them uncomfortable with their own lack of progress. None of these roles were chosen. They were reactions. Your transformation acted like a mirror, and that mirror showed people who they really were when their pride wasn't in control. You growing forced them to face the areas where they stayed stagnant for years. It made them examine the parts of their life they kept avoiding. Your discipline highlighted their procrastination. Your healing highlighted their emotional shortcuts. Your confidence highlighted their self-doubt. Without you ever saying a word, your evolution made them confront their own unspoken frustrations. What's wild is that most of these people didn't start off with any intention to study you. They didn't even take you seriously at first. But when your life began shifting direction, they had no choice but to adjust to the new version of you. Some adjusted with respect. Others adjusted with resentment. All of them adjusted with awareness. Now they're watching not because they're obsessed with you, but because your growth keeps rewriting their internal script. They can't understand how someone who started with the same limitations they did is managing to break patterns they're still stuck in. They can't figure out how you keep rising despite the moments they thought would leave you stuck. Your evolution changed the environment in ways you may never fully see. It put pressure on people to rethink who they are, where they're going, and why they haven't moved the way you have. That pressure is why they watch you so closely now. You didn't force them into these roles. Your growth did. And they're still trying to figure out how to keep up with the version of you they never saw coming. Number 3. Someone is watching, because your breakthrough threatens their narrative. Your breakthrough didn't just change your life, it shattered someone else's carefully built story. They had a narrative they repeated to themselves, a version of reality where you were limited, fragile, or destined to fail. They framed your past mistakes, your struggles, and your setbacks as proof that you would never reach the level you're at now. They had a comfortable story they could tell anyone, a story that justified their assumptions, a story that kept them feeling superior without doing the work. And then you started changing, quietly, steadily, unapologetically. The truth is, breakthroughs are loud, even when you're silent. Your progress screamed in ways that words couldn't. Every step forward dismantled the narrative someone spent years perfecting. Every new accomplishment made them reconsider the foundation of the story they had told themselves. The life they imagined you would lead didn't materialize. The path they predicted for you collapsed under the weight of your growth. That collapse was too shocking to ignore, and suddenly you became their obsession, not because they wanted to celebrate you, but because your success forced them to confront the lies they had wrapped around your potential. They watch because they need evidence, proof that what they assumed was wrong. Every time you rise, every time you take a step they didn't think you'd manage, they feel it. Not in words, but in that quiet panic that comes from realizing reality isn't bending to their expectations. You didn't just succeed, you became undeniable. What's remarkable is that this attention isn't neutral. It carries a mix of fascination, frustration, and fear. Your breakthrough has rewritten the rules of their understanding. It has made them question their judgment, their influence, and even their sense of control. And as they continue to watch, they're not just observing your life, they're witnessing the collapse of a story they relied on to feel secure. In this way, your evolution doesn't just lift you, it exposes the cracks in the structures others built around their assumptions. And those who watch are the ones forced to witness the truth they didn't want to see. You were never limited by what they said about you. Number 4. Your quiet strength. Made people realize they misread you entirely. People misjudged you because they couldn't decode your silence. They thought the way you stayed calm meant you lacked fire. They thought the way you stayed to yourself meant you didn't have depth. They assumed your gentleness meant you could be pushed, manipulated, or controlled. What they didn't know was that your quiet wasn't emptiness. It was focus. You weren't disconnected. You were observing. You weren't weak. You were choosing your timing with precision most people don't possess. Your silence never meant, "I don't know what to say." It meant, "I'm watching everything." While they were busy talking, you were gathering truth. While they were trying to impress the crowd, you were taking mental notes. While they underestimated you, you were mastering yourself. There is a kind of power that only belongs to people who don't waste energy shouting for attention. You held that power without flaunting it, and because they couldn't measure it, they assumed it didn't exist. Now they're confused because the strength they never saw is suddenly showing up in undeniable ways. You started speaking with a different level of clarity. You started making moves that didn't match the version of you they created in their minds. You started setting boundaries, making decisions, and walking away from situations that used to drain you. That shift caused a quiet panic in people who relied on your softness to stay comfortable. What unsettles them most is that you changed without asking for permission. You grew without announcing a transformation. You upgraded without explaining your plans. They can't figure out when it happened or how you developed such an unshakable core. They just woke up one day and realized the person they underestimated now has an inner strength that doesn't bend or break under pressure. Your calm now looks different to them. It's not something they can interpret or manipulate. It has a heaviness, a knowing, a confidence that can't be mistaken for weakness again. They're watching you with a mix of respect and unease because they see now that the quiet one wasn't the weakest. They were the one with the deepest foundation. And once someone sees the strength behind your silence, they can never misread you the same way again. Number 5. The one watching has access to rooms. You don't even know you're being discussed in. Someone is paying attention to you from a position you haven't reached yet, and that alone is enough to shift the energy around your life. This person isn't scrolling your page out of boredom or curiosity. They're listening to conversations where your name shows up without you even being present. They've heard stories about you, some accurate, some exaggerated, all intriguing enough to keep you on their radar. Your journey has been echoing in places you haven't walked into yet, and whether you realize it or not, you've become part of discussions that hold weight and influence. What makes their attention so powerful is that they're not watching as a spectator. They're watching as someone evaluating potential. They've seen people rise and fall. They've seen talent collapse under pressure. They've watched many talk about greatness but crumble when life tests them. But your story is different. Your resilience keeps resurfacing as a topic because it stands out. It's not loud, not dramatic, not a performance. It's consistent, it's earned, it's real. And that level of authenticity is rare enough to get noticed in rooms you don't even know exist. This person knows pieces of your story that you never publicized. They've heard the parts that slipped through conversations, the quiet acknowledgements from people who've watched your growth, the subtle respect from those who crossed paths with you at your lowest. They know more about your character than your social media could ever reveal. That's why their attention isn't accidental. They're assessing whether you're genuinely built for the level you're rising into. What shocks most chosen ones is not that they're being watched, but who is doing the watching. You think it's your peers. You think it's the people around you. But often, it's someone far removed from your current environment, someone with real influence, someone whose observation holds weight. And the most surprising part? Your name is being mentioned in a positive light by people who barely know you, simply because your resilience made its way into their conversations. Their watchfulness isn't about judgment, it's about recognition. They're trying to see if the strength you've displayed so far is just a phase or the beginning of a legacy. And the more they watch, the more convinced they're becoming that you're not just rising, you're rising into a level that has already been quietly preparing for you. Number 6. You triggered a reality check in people who thought they had you figured out. There were people who believed they had your entire life mapped out in their minds. They confidently predicted your failures, your limits, even your emotional breaking points. They thought they knew exactly where your story would stop. In fact, they built their opinions about you on outdated versions of who you used to be, and they never imagined you'd rise beyond the struggles they associated with your name. But then your life started shifting in ways that didn't match their expectations, and suddenly, their confidence in their own judgment crumbled. Your growth didn't just surprise them, it embarrassed them. It exposed how shallow their understanding truly was. These were people who assumed your setbacks were permanent. They thought your wounds defined you. They believed your environment, your past, or your mistakes were traps you'd never escape. Their entire perception of you relied on the idea that you would remain the same. But you outgrew every version they locked you into, and now they're stuck trying to figure out how they got it so wrong. Now they watch you with an uncomfortable mix of confusion and curiosity. They're trying to make sense of the transformation they didn't see coming. Your progress forces them to rethink everything they believed about you. They can't explain how you healed without announcing it, how you leveled up without warning, or how you developed the kind of strength they never associated with your name. Their certainty has turned into doubt, not about you, but about themselves. The hardest pill for them to swallow is realizing they underestimated someone who was quietly rebuilding in ways they couldn't see. You didn't need their validation, their guidance, or their approval. You grew anyway, and every step of your evolution challenges their belief that they were wise, perceptive, or spiritually intuitive. You shattered the image they had of you so completely that they're still trying to update their mental version of who you are now. Your success didn't just elevate you, it humbled them. You forced them to confront the fact that their discernment wasn't as sharp as they thought. You made their predictions look small. And now, watching you isn't just curiosity, it's their attempt to repair the credibility they lost within themselves. Number 7. Someone is watching. Because you became the proof they needed but didn't want. There are people who built their entire belief system around limitation. They convinced themselves that certain dreams weren't possible, certain wounds couldn't be healed, and certain cycles couldn't be broken. They believed struggle was permanent, and success was reserved for a different kind of person. And for a long time, they used those beliefs as a shield, something to hide behind whenever life demanded more from them than they felt capable of giving. Then you came along and quietly destroyed every excuse they leaned on. Your progress forced them to confront the very thing they avoided, the truth that change is possible, elevation is real, and transformation is not restricted to a chosen few. You were the unexpected example, the inconvenient evidence. You made it out of situations they considered impossible to escape. You healed from experiences they swore nobody recovers from. You grew in ways that didn't fit the narrative they repeated to themselves for comfort. And your success didn't just inspire them, it challenged them in ways they weren't ready for. Deep down, they know you didn't have more resources, more support, or more advantages than they did. If anything, you had less. They watched you struggle. They saw your setbacks. They witnessed your breaking points. That's exactly why your rise bothers them. It exposes the gap between what they claimed was impossible and what they simply didn't try to overcome. You became living proof that their limitations weren't final. They were choices. Now, they watch you with a strange kind of tension. They're fascinated because your growth is impressive, but they're uncomfortable because your success shines a light on everything they've been avoiding. Every time you break another pattern, they feel their excuses crumble a little more. Every step you take forward forces them to question why they stayed still. They're watching, not because they want to learn from you, but because it's easier to study your life than to examine their own. The irony is that your journey is the exact evidence they secretly needed to believe more was possible for them too. But instead of admitting that, they choose to observe from a distance, caught between admiration and denial, inspired yet threatened, hopeful but too proud to say you proved them wrong. Number 8. Your presence is revealing what people truly value, and it's not what they said. People love to talk about their values, but very few actually live by them. You learned this the hard way. Individuals who loudly claimed to value honesty suddenly grew uncomfortable when you spoke truthfully. They didn't react because your honesty was harsh. They reacted because it was pure. It exposed the parts of their life they keep hidden behind polite lies. Your transparency didn't embarrass you, it embarrassed them. It forced them to look at the inconsistencies they hoped nobody would ever point out. The same people who preached loyalty as if it were their personality trait showed you just how conditional their loyalty really was. They celebrated you when you were easy to manage, easy to understand, easy to predict. But the moment you grew, or needed support, or required something real, they disappeared. It wasn't an accident. It was a revelation. Your evolution highlighted the thinness of their commitment. They weren't loyal to you, they were loyal to the version of you that didn't challenge their comfort. And humility. That was another myth. People claimed they respected humility until they were standing next to someone who practiced it sincerely. Your simplicity made them insecure. Your lack of need for attention confused them. Your grounded spirit made their performative humility look cheap. Instead of appreciating your authenticity, they tried to belittle you for it. Not because anything was wrong with you, but because your presence quietly exposed the gap between their image and their reality. Now they watch you from the sidelines with a conflicted fascination. They study you because you represent the version of themselves they wish they had the courage to embody. You live the values they only talk about. You make decisions they avoid. You stand in truths they fear. You move with a kind of integrity that forces people to confront their own contradictions. Your life has become a mirror, one they never asked for, one they can't ignore. Their attention isn't admiration, it's recognition. They recognize the discipline they don't practice, the honesty they don't uphold, the humility they only pretend to carry. And so they watch you, not because you're perfect, but because your presence reminds them of everything they claim to value, yet couldn't live up to themselves. Number 9, the watcher isn't checking for your failure. They're checking for their chance. There is someone keeping an eye on your every move, not because they care if you win or lose, but because they're calculating when you'll be convenient for them again. This person isn't studying your downfall. They already counted you out once. What they're scanning now is your rise. They want to know when you'll reach the point where reconnecting with you benefits them more than ignoring you. Their attention isn't sentimental, it's strategic. This is the same person who overlooked you when you had nothing to offer. When your life felt heavy, They acted like your weight wasn't worth carrying. When you needed honesty, they gave excuses. When you needed support, they gave distance. When you were vulnerable, they gave silence. They let you struggle alone, fully expecting you to stay exactly where you were. And now that your life is shifting, they're watching with a different kind of interest. One that has nothing to do with your well-being and everything to do with your potential value. What unsettles them now is the possibility that you might become someone they need. They're monitoring your growth like an investor stalking a stock they regret not buying early. They want to see if you become influential, stable, visible, or blessed enough for them to slide back in without looking opportunistic. They're tracking your progress to determine the perfect moment to reintroduce themselves with a rehearsed apology or a suddenly warm, "I've been thinking about you." Their attention is transactional. They want access to the version of you they never believed you'd become. They want the benefits of your new season without acknowledging the role they played in your pain. They want the glow without earning a place in the healing that created it. And the irony? They're terrified you'll reach a level where they're no longer relevant. So they keep watching, hoping for an opening, waiting for a moment, studying your life the way someone studies an opportunity they don't deserve but desperately want. Their eyes aren't on your downfall, they're on your elevation, because your elevation determines whether they can come back or whether they've officially lost access forever. Number 10. You became a silent threat without even trying. You didn't set out to intimidate anyone, yet your very existence has become a force people can't ignore. Your growth wasn't flashy, it wasn't performative, but it was seismic in ways others could feel. You didn't announce your victories, you didn't parade your healing, and you certainly didn't wait for permission to rise. And that's exactly why it's unsettling for the people who have been watching. The ones who assumed you'd stay in the box they placed you in are now scrambling to understand a reality they never imagined. Your progress disrupted more than just expectations. It disrupted comfort zones. The quiet consistency of your actions revealed gaps in the lives of people who measured themselves against you without admitting it. They assumed you'd falter, that your patience would run out, that your setbacks would define you. But each step forward, each boundary you enforced, each success you achieved without fanfare exposed how unprepared they were to witness someone else quietly claiming power. That alone makes your presence a threat, not because you wanted it to be, but because your life refuses to conform to their limited imagination. Healing, too, has its own disruptive force. You didn't advertise your scars, but your resilience made their wounds visible. People who hid behind drama, excuses, or constant complaining suddenly had to confront their own weaknesses, reflected in the calm strength you displayed. They realized they compared themselves to you more than they cared to admit, and that awareness made them uneasy. Your rise shined light in corners they'd preferred to leave dark. And the watcher, the one tracking you so closely, isn't just curious. They're trying to decode your methods. They want to know why you're succeeding where they failed, how you're moving forward when they're stuck, and what unseen habits or inner discipline created a reality they can't replicate. You became a silent threat without planning it, simply by living authentically, moving intentionally, and refusing to shrink for anyone else. And now that quiet, unannounced growth is exactly what has people watching, unsettled, and scrambling to understand the power they underestimated. Number 11. People who pretended to be above you are now afraid you'll surpass them. There were people who once acted like being connected to you was an act of charity. They carried themselves as if they were doing you a kindness by keeping you around, as if you were the learner and they were the level. They believed you would always look up to them, rely on them, or move beneath them. But now the roles have shifted, and the shift is shaking them. The same people who dismissed you are suddenly monitoring your every move, not out of support, but out of fear. They expected you to remain the version of yourself they first met, uncertain, inexperienced, unrefined. They assumed your potential had a limit, and they arrogantly believed they had already seen the best you could become. But life has a way of exposing the truth, and your growth has become the kind of truth they can't unsee. Each step you take upward dismantles the superiority they built their identity on. And now they're watching because they feel the pressure of your progress catching up to them. Their fear isn't rooted in hate, it's rooted in insecurity. They can't unlearn the fact that they underestimated someone who was quietly studying, developing, and evolving while they were busy performing. They never imagined you would gain clarity, strategy, or momentum. Yet here you are, rising with a speed that contradicts their expectations and threatens their pride. They're tracking your progress to calculate how much time they have left before you eclipse the image they tried to project. Some of them aren't afraid of losing you. They're afraid of losing the position they held over you. Your growth exposes how little they actually had figured out. Your confidence highlights how deeply they doubted themselves. And your elevation shines a light on how superficial their advantage really was. They're not watching because they care. They're watching because the gap between who they claim to be and who they actually are is shrinking. You didn't rise to compete. You didn't evolve to intimidate. But your trajectory is doing both. And now the people who once pretended to be above you are quietly panicking because deep down they know exactly what's coming. You're about to surpass them in ways they never dreamed you could. Number 12. Someone is watching. Because they realized you don't break the way. Others do. You've been through storms that would have crushed almost anyone else. The kind of storms that leave people bitter, fearful, or broken. But you didn't just survive them. You grew stronger, sharper, and more capable. Every challenge became a stepping stone rather than a trap. Every setback became a lesson rather than a defeat. You didn't just endure pain, you transformed it into power, clarity, and an unshakable sense of self. That kind of resilience doesn't go unnoticed, and someone out there is watching because what you've done is rare, almost unnatural in its consistency and depth. Most people respond to hardship with reaction. They panic, they stumble, they fall apart. But you didn't. You didn't waste energy on despair or self-pity. You absorbed what life threw at you, processed it, and came out upgraded on the other side. That quiet strength, that unspoken capability, has drawn eyes without you even trying. The watcher isn't observing to critique, they're observing to understand. They're trying to figure out how someone can face the same pressures, the same losses, the same betrayals, and yet emerge not just intact, but elevated. Your healing was more than personal. It was revolutionary in the eyes of someone who expected you to break. Your rebuilding wasn't just functional, it was strategic, intentional, and far-reaching. They can see the difference between someone who simply survives and someone who evolves through survival. You became a living example of what it means to rise without losing integrity, compassion, or vision. And that's what makes you fascinating to the watcher. They're seeing a blueprint they can't quite decode. Your bounce back doesn't follow their logic. Your growth doesn't fit the patterns they've memorized from observing others. They're watching because they sense you've unlocked something they've never seen before. A resilience that doesn't just return you to where you were, but propels you far beyond it. You don't break. You rebuild. You don't just survive. You transform. And in watching you, they're realizing the difference is so profound that it can't be ignored, denied, or forgotten. Number 13. You expose the difference between attention and awareness. There was a time when people looked at you but had no real understanding of who you were. They saw the surface version, whatever was convenient, simple, or familiar to their assumptions. They paid attention, but they weren't aware. Attention is passive. It doesn't require depth. Awareness is different. It requires recognition, perception, and honesty. And somewhere along your journey, without trying, without performing, without begging for validation, you shifted into someone who could no longer be overlooked. That shift didn't happen because you became loud. It happened because you became real. Your authenticity disrupted the comfortable illusions people had about you. They were used to defining you based on old stories, old phases, or old versions of you that no longer exist. They thought they had you mapped out, but then you started moving in ways their assumptions couldn't contain. You healed in silence. You upgraded your mindset. You aligned your values. You detached from chaos. You started showing up as your whole self, rather than the filtered self they were familiar with. And suddenly, they went from glancing at you to truly seeing you, because the person you've become demands awareness, not attention. The shift was internal before it ever became visible. You changed the way you carried yourself, the way you spoke, the way you reacted, the way you didn't react, and the way you chose peace without sacrificing your power. People feel that kind of shift before they understand it. They sense something has elevated in you, even if they can't explain it. That's why their eyes linger. That's why their curiosity increases. That's why you notice people paying closer attention to the things you do so naturally. What unsettles them most is that you didn't try to be noticed. You didn't campaign for awareness. You didn't force anyone to take you seriously. You simply became undeniable by being aligned with who you truly are, something most people never achieve because they're too busy trying to impress instead of trying to grow. You exposed the truth. Attention is easy to get, but awareness is earned. And you earned it by becoming someone whose presence carries meaning, depth, and weight that can't be ignored. Number 14. The One. Watching you the closest is the one who thought you'd never make it. The biggest surprise in your story isn't that people are watching you now, it's who is watching. The one studying your every move today is the same one who confidently predicted that you wouldn't get this far. They weren't neutral, they were invested in your failure. They genuinely believed your circumstances were too heavy, your wounds too deep, your past too messy, and your setbacks too severe for you to ever rise above them. And because they thought they understood you, they assumed life would confirm their expectations. But life didn't. You didn't. And now they're stuck observing a version of you they never imagined would exist. Their shock isn't based on your success alone, it's based on the collapse of the narrative they built around you. They spent years believing your potential had an expiration date. They assumed their doubt was insight, their criticism was truth, and their dismissal was justified. Now every step you take, every layer you outgrow, every achievement you reach forces them to confront the fact that they miscalculated you entirely. Their predictions didn't age well, and their confidence in your downfall looks foolish in the face of your growth. What makes them watch so closely now is the discomfort of being wrong about someone they should have never underestimated. You weren't supposed to heal as deeply as you did. You weren't supposed to recover as quickly as you did. You weren't supposed to evolve as quietly as you did. In their mind, you were supposed to become a warning, not a testimony. But instead of collapsing, you rebuilt. Instead of quitting, you adapted. Instead of shrinking, you expanded. That's why they watch. Because your existence has become a contradiction to their beliefs. Because every new level you rise to exposes their lack of faith in you. Because you're walking proof that their certainty was just ignorance wearing confidence. They watch you now, not out of admiration, but because you shattered the script they wrote for your life. And the most humbling part for them is this: you didn't just make it, you exceeded every limit they thought would hold you down. Conclusion. The truth is undeniable. Being a chosen one isn't about being noticed. It's about being unignorable. Every move you've made, every battle you've survived, every rise you've orchestrated has sent ripples through the lives of people who thought they understood you. Some watched in disbelief, some in envy, some in fear, and some in quiet admiration they'll never admit out loud. Your journey has exposed truths about others they never wanted to see, triggered reality checks they weren't ready for, and shattered narratives they relied on to feel secure. You became proof of what they claimed was impossible, a silent threat without intending to be one, and a mirror reflecting their own limitations. The watchers, the skeptics, the ones who underestimated you, they're all evidence of your power. Every eye tracking you, every quiet conversation in which your name appears, every misjudgment they made about your potential only highlights the depth of your transformation. You didn't rise to impress. You didn't succeed to intimidate. You evolved to honor yourself, and in doing so, you forced the world to recalibrate how it sees you. You became someone who cannot be boxed, someone whose growth cannot be predicted, someone whose presence reveals the gap between pretension and reality. And this is the ultimate lesson for anyone watching your journey. Your life is your proof, your victories are your statements, and your strength is your signature. Those who observe you now are witnessing more than your success. They're witnessing the unfolding of a life that refuses to conform to limitations, expectations, or outdated opinions. You've changed the rules, rewritten the story, and awakened a level of awareness in others that they never knew they were capable of feeling. Your story is living, breathing evidence that authenticity, resilience, and quiet determination will always outweigh noise, assumption, and empty judgment. So, if this message resonated with you, if it stirred something deep inside, don't let it stop here. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to stay connected to content that speaks directly to the chosen ones. Like this video if it hit the truth in a way nobody else could. Comment below with your experiences and insights, because your story matters, and share this with someone who needs to see it. The world is watching, and it's time to rise unapologetically. God bless you.